When we started building Elements, our new web design app for Mac, we knew we couldn't rely on outdated CSS frameworks like Foundation or Bootstrap. Those tools might have been great for their time, but they lock you into rigid layouts, predefined components, and a lot of global CSS that you end up constantly overriding. We needed something modern, flexible, a system that would let users design visually, but still generate clean, customizable, production-ready code. That's why we chose Tailwind CSS as the default styling engine inside of Elements. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the differences between using Tailwind or a CSS framework like Foundation. But before we go any further, I want to clear up, Elements isn't locked to Tailwind. You can absolutely use Foundation or any other CSS framework directly inside of Elements. In fact, I've made a demo set of components that use Foundation CSS, and we're going to look at that in just a bit. However, we've designed Elements to be as flexible and powerful as possible. Tailwind is just the default because it delivers the best experience for component-based design. Okay, I've got the Tailwind website open here. I'm not going to go too much into Tailwind because if you're using Elements, you're already using Tailwind. We might do some comparisons later, but we will mainly be focusing on Foundation CSS. Now, if you're using Elements already, all of the components that ship with the core app are using Tailwind under the hood. So all of the controls that you're used to, those map essentially to utility classes inside of Tailwind. Now, Foundation takes a completely different approach. What actually happens with Foundation is you need to, or you can build the CSS via Sass, which is a slightly outdated system these days. It is still very popular, but a lot of the newer frameworks like Tailwind have moved away from Sass. But essentially what you need to do is actually, if you're going to use the CDN links, you actually need to include the compiled CSS. So even if you're not using some of the parts of Foundation, often you will include a lot of CSS that isn't actually being used on your site. Now, this is one key difference between Foundation CSS and Bootstrap and Tailwind. What Tailwind does is actually only include the CSS that you're using on your site. So there's no CSS for perhaps some components in Foundation that you're not using. That will never be included. So that gives you a lot less CSS essentially to ship to your user. So the CSS in Tailwind is often around 10 kilobytes, whereas the CSS from Foundation or Bootstrap is often a few hundred kilobytes. And if we've got time later, we'll actually do a comparison between the file sizes in these two libraries. Okay, the other thing with Foundation is there's also JavaScript that ships with it. Now, that's so that the framework can ship things like accordions, drop-down menus, things like that. Anything that requires JavaScript, you need to include their JavaScript file as well. So again, if you're not using some of the parts of the JavaScript, like you don't have a drop-down menu, you're still going to be including that on your site because that's just the way this build system seems to be set up. One thing to also notice is that when I said Foundation and Bootstrap are slightly outdated, Foundation still relies on jQuery. Now, don't get me wrong, jQuery was amazing for its time, essentially, but the web has moved on. None of the modern CSS frameworks are shipping with jQuery these days. It's kind of a legacy technology at this point. So yeah, you would need to not only ship the Foundation JavaScript, you're also going to be shipping jQuery and perhaps one or two other older, should I say, JavaScript libraries like jQuery. Okay, anyway, if you've got Foundation installed, you'll see they have a lot of things set up here for you. There are, let's have a look at the containers. For example, there's a call out. That will do something like this for you. There's things like a card. So a card is very popular. You can get something like this on your site with this HTML. So The key differences here between Tailwind and Foundation are Foundation uses these kind of composed classes. So you'll see you've got card here, you've got a card divider, and you've got a card section. So you need to wrap your content in these very specific class names to ensure your card works. The difference with Tailwind is what you do is you compose all of your class names inside of your component. So in your HTML, you just, like a buffet, you go up and you pick the class names that you need. If you need padding, margin, border radius, anything that you need, backgrounds, you pick the utility classes and you compose that directly in your HTML. Now, the key thing to understand here is that if you, for example, if we scroll down here, there's a couple of examples here where you want some additional padding, or you want to move things around, you want them in a grid like this. What you end up doing is you add often like a modifier class. So you might have card, but if you want like a card this to be padded, you either need to add additional HTML like this, like a card section, or you need to add additional CSS to your card class. So what happens is you end up with a lot of duplicated CSS because the nature of it is not to use utilities. It's to additionally add CSS to each one of these classes, or add a new class for that specific use case. Whereas in Tailwind, all of the, let's have a look for the padding, for example. Like this, you'll see there is a whole range of padding classes, and wherever you want like padding 8, you would just put P8, and that class is only ever generated once for your entire site. So even if you have a button and a card that both want padding 8, all you do is use that utility class, and that CSS only gets generated once. So whereas in Foundation, if you wanted this card to be padded and you wanted the button to be padded with the same amount, you're very likely going to be writing that CSS in 2 places. So that's one of like the key differences between Tailwind and Foundation. We're going to look a little bit more into Foundation in a minute, but I just wanted to mention Bootstrap. Also another very popular framework. Works very similar to Foundation in the sense that it has a lot of things like components, pre-designed components essentially. Like a card, you end up with a very rigid HTML structure, and you have like a card class, you had a card image top, card body, card title, etc. So this these class names need to be added very specifically in the right order, in the right place for all of this CSS to work together. Now, I don't know exactly, probably card body has some sort of padding around it here. So again, if you had a button and the padding was the same as the card, you would be writing padding 10px on the card body. You'd also be writing padding 10px on the button. So again, it's a little bit of duplication, or not a little bit of duplication, it's a lot of duplication. And you end up with very bloated CSS. You end up with quite an unmanageable CSS file where you're not really sure what you can change and where you can change it. And what I've seen a lot previously is that someone will just add a new class that does a very specific thing, and they'll chuck that on the bottom of the CSS file, and that just bloats the CSS even more. So anyway, Foundation, Bootstrap, very similar approaches. We're not going to talk any more about Bootstrap in this video. A lot of you are probably more familiar with the Foundation CSS framework, or those of you watching this video will be. So that's why I've chosen to do a comparison between Tailwind and Foundation. Okay, next thing I wanted to talk about is frequency of updates. How modern is the framework? What's being added to it? How often are we seeing updates, improvements, new features, etc.? So Tailwind, they are doing very, very frequent updates, multiple times per year, major updates. They're very, very good with backwards compatibility. Often you can upgrade to major versions without any changes to your code base. I know going from 3 to 4 was a slightly larger update, but still there weren't really any breaking changes. It was more about new features, better APIs for the utility classes and so on. Anyway, they are doing very regular updates. They're very active on their blog. We can see here, just what are we recording? 5 days ago here, they've done an update. We've got stuff in May, April, March, etc. Lots of updates, lots of activity around Tailwind, very active community, very positive, a lot of downloads that we're going to have a look at in a minute as well. Whereas Foundation, so this is the Foundation website. I think it's looked like this for I don't know how many years, possibly at least 5 years, probably getting on to 10 years. Don't quote me on that, but definitely it's looked like this for about 5 years. Whoops, I've clicked the download there. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to the docs, and we are going to the site docs. We can have a look at the change log for the Foundation framework. So we can see here we've got something in September last year. So we're getting on for a year since the last release. I'm not sure exactly what was updated here. A few nice little fixes possibly. Faster builds. SAS depreciation warning seems to have been gone. Yeah, just nothing major there, doesn't look like. And then we go back to a year before that, so August 2023 was the release between September 24, August 23. So we're looking at like one release per year roughly, and we go back to 2022, yeah, and then 2021. Okay, so again, this was one of the reasons the updates around Foundation CSS have really dropped off. So not too many updates on Foundation CSS. The website's very old. Another thing that is very telling on Foundation as to why we didn't want to use it is things like grids. Let's see if I can find the grid. Yeah, so CSS has had grid support for quite a few years now. It's a very, very powerful, very good tool for layouts on your site. Foundation doesn't even support the CSS grid. I think this is all using Flexbox still, which Flexbox is great, but it's not CSS grid. It's two different tools for two different use cases. A little bit technical, but yeah, another reason why Foundation is kind of just lagging behind with regards to comparing it to Tailwind. Okay, next thing I want to look at is download stats or npm installs. So an install is basically how many times is the developer downloading this package, how many times is it being used. We can see here the blue line is Tailwind, the red line is Bootstrap, and the orange line is Foundation. Now Foundation is essentially flatlining down the bottom there. We can go to the latest one, and we've got 20 million downloads for Tailwind, we've got 4.7 for Bootstrap, and we've got 85,000 for Foundation CSS. Not really a comparison there. Again, this was kind of a nail in the coffin. Like, no one is essentially using Foundation. Anyone doing anything new, as you can see here, is essentially using Tailwind. It's just overtaken completely. Bootstrap, still a lot more popular than Foundation, but as you can see, are basically flat. But yeah, just Tailwind has just taken off. So that's downloads, not really comparable. We can also go to the state of CSS. Now this is a survey done for developers, not a massive sample size, still a few thousand people fill out this. It's very developer focused, but it does kind of give you a good idea of what are developers using. So this is CSS usage. As it says here, Tailwind CSS continues to forge its own path far ahead of other more traditional competitors. So we can see 75% of the respondents are using Tailwind, 54% are using Bootstrap, and then we need to go down and find Foundation. Here, 7% of the respondents to this survey are using Foundation CSS. Tailwind clear winner on pretty much every metric that I could find. So now, before I go into elements and show you a comparison between Tailwind components and Foundation CSS components, what I want to do is just show you that comparison of file sizes between Tailwind CSS and Foundation CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my ChatGPT, what's the average CSS size of a production website in both Foundation CSS and Tailwind CSS? So let's, just so we can compare like file sizes between the two frameworks. So as of 2025, Foundation minified, which your site should be using minified, and that's a fair comparison, 90 to 100 kilobytes. Tailwind, average CSS size 10 to 50 kilobytes. So this is a better comparison here. So 90 to 150 and 10 to 50 on Tailwind. So you're essentially 10 times larger, often 10 times larger on Foundation than you are on Tailwind. So that's that comparison size. Let's go into elements. Let's go into elements and have a look at using Foundation inside of elements compared to Tailwind components. So as I mentioned at the beginning, what I've done is I've built a Foundation dev pack. This actually loads in Foundation directly into elements and allows us to use all of Foundation CSS, essentially. So over here, I've got a Foundation project. You can see my Foundation button here, which is a just a very sparse component. But what you'll see is there is a Foundation button. So if I go actually over to here, let's see if I can find the button. Here we go. So the button is here. You can see, you can see the button is essentially this button here. And all I've done is, if we inspect this element, let's get this to size. We can see there we have a button with a class of button, and that is basically what you do in here. They've got a button with a class of button. They're adding additional CSS classes, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But essentially, just to get a button like this, you just need a class of button, and that will do it for you. Now, as you can see here, there are different variants of this button. They are predefined. They have named classes like alert and success. So what I did is I've hooked up a control in elements that allows us to set the type of button. So you can see here success goes to the green color. Now this is a full working button. I can type anything in here and it works. And yeah, that is basically a Foundation button working inside of elements. Now, as I say, the one thing or the comparison to a Tailwind button that we've got is none of the styling is tied to one particular class name. So like I say here, like you've got a style of success. If you wanted to do that in elements, because it's so much more flexible, there isn't actually a predefined success style. Like that's not a thing. What you do is you go and you choose the background color that you want. So if you want something green button, you can do that. And you can just choose from the color scale here. So if that green doesn't quite work for you, you can do something darker. Or if you don't want a green button, you want this slightly emerald color, you can just pick from the array of colors here. So tying a success class name to a specific color really doesn't make sense when you're building component-based design systems. What we would do is if we wanted a green button, let's actually choose green. If we wanted this to be our success button, so let's just say success, what we could do is, again, now, because we've got the flexibility to change the hover color, what I should also do is change this to green, and we'll make it a bit darker. So now we get the green hover color. So you can see that's kind of similar to the foundation button. If we wanted this as like a global success button, what we do is we would just create or convert to a global. And that will add the button in here. We can rename this as success button. And then we can just add that across the site wherever we want. Now, if we wanted to change the green color, we can do that once on any one of the buttons because the controls are linked. So if we wanted a slightly lighter green to start with, you'll see they're both changed there. And if we wanted a completely different color, let's say the brown color on hover, we can do that and it works everywhere. So hopefully you're starting to see the benefits of utility-based design in Tailwind, whereas the kind of more rigid, predefined designs with Foundation. Now, obviously, you can set up a hover style for the Foundation button, but it's not that easy to do with a UI here. Like we definitely could achieve it, and I'm going to show you some custom CSS in a minute that will do a couple of more advanced things, but it's not as easy as the Tailwind process, where everything is just designed to be composed together. You get the freedom as the user to build up the designs however you want and easily change things. There's no overriding of styles. There's no conflict of which style wins out when I publish my site. Everything that you set in these controls, whether it's the hover states here, it just works on that component. Really want to reiterate that, like the power that you get in Elements with this design system just cannot be matched in a framework like Foundation. It's just not as easy to build components, and it's not as easy to write the CSS for a system like this, essentially. Okay, let's get rid of that button. So next, let's have a look at Foundation. What I've done here is I've actually pulled in a couple of Foundation components. So if we go to the Foundation site, there is somewhere a kitchen sink. There it is on Getting Started. So this has, I think, like essentially like all of the components that they ship on a page. Let's find the card. I can't see it there. Okay, I'll tell you what, let's just go to containers card. So as I showed you earlier, this is like a standard card, some variations on it. But what I've done is I've taken one of these, I've copied the code, and I've just pasted that into a custom component. So as you can see here, we've got a card. Here is my CSS. So let me make this window slightly bigger so we can kind of see what we're doing. Let's pop that into there. Okay, so I've added my Foundation 6 card, and you can see the template for it here. Now, what I've also done is I've added a couple of theme controls or styling controls here. So that's done in the properties. If you want to know more about how to do this, check out the Elements documentation. There's examples for all of this stuff. We've also got, if you click here, there are examples of using lots of different things, just as a quick little Kickstarter if you're interested. Anyway, I've added the properties. They get an ID. I can use that ID in my template file or in my styles file. So as I mentioned earlier, if we wanted to customize this, we've got a card and we've got a couple of card sections. So if I wanted additional padding, perhaps on the image here, what I would need to do is either override the card section. So if we just do a card section, and if I say padding, let's just put a lot on there so we can see it working. So if I put 100 pixels, you'll see that gets added. But what happens is it also gets added to this content down below. Now, I didn't want that to happen. I only wanted to add additional padding to the image. So what do? We need to add some sort of modifier or some sort of additional class onto here to make this work. So let's do card section and let's just add padding as the name. So this is my custom class name, and I go to my styles. I've already set this up, just commented out. So if I uncomment that, you'll see card section is now going to have padding, and it's hooked up to this padding control. So this says 0. If I put 20 into here, you'll see it automatically gets updated. So this is a very basic example of how you might set up Foundation CSS inside of Elements and have custom controls working to adjust the styling. Now, the next thing you might be wondering is, in Foundation, I think they do ship with a few kind of utility type classes. They kind of did add a few little like margin, small, and things like that. I did think about using that as an example, but I also want to show you a slightly more advanced example of how you might use something like this as a drop down. So if you wanted like the padding to be small or none or large, for example, I thought I'd show you how you could do that. So let's get rid of the padding for now. And what I'm going to do is use this class name. So again, I'm doing kind of a modifier type approach to the class name. We're saying the card section should have the named padding. So the naming might not make sense, but the idea is that you add an additional class essentially to override any settings that are set on the card section. And in there, let's uncomment this. And all I've done is I've used a CSS calc function, and I'm just saying like times 16 pixels by the padding size. So if we do this, you'll see that gets updated. So the values for each one of these is 0, 1, 2, and 3. So what happens is 16 pixels times 0, 1, 2, or 3. And that sets the padding on this class name. And that class name has been added to the wrapper around the image there. So that is how you could style a Foundation component inside of Elements. You have access to all of the same UI properties that all of the core components do, and you can modify those however you want. So I've shown you a couple of different ways there. We've used a number field and we've just mapped that over to pixels. You could have used rems or whatever you wanted. I've also showed you a different way to approach this with named controls like small, medium, large. And again, you could have just hard-coded pixel values into these and use that. But I thought I'd show you that you can also use things like CSS functions, like the calc function, just to do something a bit more interesting. Okay, so yes, the last thing I want to show you also was if you wanted to add margin, for example, to the card, how would we do that? So in our components, in the let's actually add a container in here just so that I can show you how it works in our components. So we have a spacing, and you can just apply margin on here. So what that does is apply the utility class to that component, and it pushes the component down in this case. So we're adding margin 14. If you're not aware, in Elements, you can customize all of those values. If you go to the Theme Studio, you can see all of the values or the underlying values for each one of those. If you ever wanted to override this scale, you can do so. You can just right click and duplicate that. It will come up here and you can do custom spacing. So you can add, or you can actually add custom name spacing like small as well if you really wanted to. And that becomes available up here. So like so. But I'm getting off track. What you can do, let's remove that before I forget. You can find the underlying value in here. It's a 4-pixel scale if you're interested. But yeah, that's how you kind of do it on a core component within Elements. It uses the theme spacing control, and as I say, if you use margin 10 everywhere, that class is only going to get applied, or it's only going to get generated once. However, if you wanted to do that on the card, As I say, there are a couple of margin utilities, but they're very limited. They don't really work nicely responsively, and they're kind of hard to understand or hard to remember, hard to work with. So one way I've often see people do is, again, they could use this modifier approach like so, or they just stick it on their card class. So if they know all of their cards everywhere should always have a certain margin applied, you can just do it like this. So you're kind of just tacking on additional CSS to an already defined CSS class, which might seem like a good idea, but what happens is this component does that, sets this additional card CSS. You're going to have to, if you ever want to change this, you need to track down which component was setting that CSS value, and is there another component also adding CSS to this card class. It just gets a mess and it's difficult to work with. That is a card example from Foundation. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea, again, why we didn't go with Foundation CSS. It's very rigid. It's a lot harder to work with in a component-based flexible design system like the one you have in Elements. Okay, what I also wanted to do is show you that, let's get rid of a few of these things. Not only can you create cards, I've also just copied over a accordion example. Now, I need to have my button on here just so everything loads. But yeah, all I've done is I've taken an accordion example from the Foundation website. So on here, we've got accordion. You'll see this one here. You click on these. Now, I haven't obviously spent the time to be able to modify the content in edit mode. So this is all hard coded at the moment. But if I preview that in the browser, you will see that the accordion from Foundation is working as expected inside of Elements. So we could make this editable if we wanted. We can add a text directive, and we can just say title 1. This needs to be double quotes, and you can see I can now actually type anything into here. We preview that, and you can see that gets updated. So you definitely could go through and make this content editable. Just to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the video, that Elements isn't tied to Tailwind and the components that we ship in the core pack. You can, if you want to, create your own Foundation pack. You can make everything work in the same way that the built-in accordion does. So you can see here, these are a lot more customizable. You can add like a text into here and then something else into there, and you can call this title like so, and this would be the content, and it's editable for each one of the accordions. So I've spent a bit of time making sure that works nicely. You could definitely do the same on the Foundation CSS accordion if you wanted to. Let's go to Foundation and let's find something else interesting. Let's go for a navigation. Let's have a look at their menu. Now, I haven't looked at this for quite a while. Okay, that looks like a standard menu. Let's copy that. I'm going to create a new HTML custom component. That gets added. I can pop that in there and I can paste that. And there we go. We have a Foundation menu in our site. We can rename this as F6 menu and we are good to go. Now, if you wanted to make this dynamic, you absolutely can as well. You just need to refer to the Elements documentation. You have access to all of the pages in your site. You can loop over those, create each one of these list items, and those will be linked to each appropriate page. You would be good to go. Let's see if they got something a bit more advanced. Let's have a look for a drop-down menu. That might be more interesting. Okay, okay, yeah, this looks good. This is kind of what you can achieve with the built-in menu in Elements. So let's copy that, paste that into there instead. Oh wait, that's not the full HTML. Let's go for this one. I think I need all of this. Let's copy that into Elements. And if we preview that, there we go. Now we've got a drop-down menu from Foundation CSS inside of Elements. So if anyone's telling you Elements is tied to Tailwind, don't believe them, because as I've shown you here, you can use any CSS framework that you want. But this is a proof of concept that I put together in about an hour or so, just to get this demo going. But yeah, don't believe anyone that says you can't get Foundation CSS or Bootstrap into Elements, because you absolutely can. So just before we wrap this up, let's go back to our Tailwind Elements example. And let's have a look. We've got a few templates in here. So these, sorry, that's my resources, my templates. We can very quickly build up a page in Elements. I don't want that one. Let's go for sticky menu and let's pull that open. So these are the templates that now ship in Elements. These make it very quick and easy to build a full website that is fully customizable. The Foundation examples are very rigid. They would take quite a bit of work to style in the same way that you can in Elements. But yeah, these are very nice to use. You just drop in, let's get rid of that. You just drop in the templates. And as you can see here, we have a responsive website working nicely. If we wanted to change any of this, you know, we can just click on the background here. We can change the banner. If I go to my resources here, we can change to maybe this one. Or if you wanted something different, let's say we wanted that. So you just drop those in, find one that works for you. And if you want to change the text, you can change the text. Again, you saw me use the buttons earlier, so you're kind of familiar with how that works. Let's have a look. We could, if we wanted to, let's add an image here actually. Let's just drop that into there. One thing I want to show you is the transform. So if you're watching this and you're not aware of how Tailwind CSS works in Elements, you get access to a lot of very, very nice features. So for example, transform. If I wanted to animate this or transition this on hover, all I can do is I can set transform to hover. I can set the end state. I can scale that to 110%, for example. Now, when I hover over, you'll see that instantly happens. We can even say hover on parent. So even if I hover on the outside of the image there, that will still apply. We can even, let's see what this is inside of. It's in the grid. So we can say when we hover over the grid, fire that transition. And you can see I come in from the side here and that just works. You can mix and match these up as well. So you can start at say -2%. Then when we hover in, we go to 0%. Just to make that obvious, let's rotate that 10. And there you can see that happens. So there's all sorts of controls here that just work with the components. And this is really made possible by Tailwind. We would have had such a hard time making this design system and these features available to you inside of Elements had we gone with one of the older frameworks like Foundation CSS or Bootstrap. It just doesn't have the array of utility classes that we can mix and match and pick from to build up these designs. So yeah, I would really encourage you, use the templates that ship in the app now, pop them into your site. You will have something very nice, very functional, very lean, very clean on your server within a few minutes if you really want to. Let's preview that in the browser. And so there you can see that just works in the browser. We've got the full layout. Everything is responsive. And the animations obviously work everywhere. We've got a menu that pops in. Everything just works, and it is just so nice to work with when you get the amount of flexibility and control in the Tailwind controls that we've got built into Elements. Okay, before I wrap up, I'm just going to do a very final comparison between these Foundation components and our really nice core components that we ship in Elements. So what I want to say is the default styling on Foundation is just old and tired. There's no two ways about it. It's just not a modern look. You can definitely make it modern, but it is going to take more work. The out-of-the-box experience of Foundation CSS is it's just an older, very rigid, old style of websites. As you can kind of see here, the buttons are square, all of the typography and the default styling of everything is just, it just doesn't really match the modern web. One other thing I did want to say actually is if you put a container in here, this is a container using Tailwind, you can still, if I go to my tree here, I can put the card inside of the container. And I can lay that out. I could even put it inside of a grid if I wanted to. So we could have multiple cards inside of a grid. Everything just works. I can put the grid inside the container if you want. You can set the, let's set some gap on here, like so. These just gets laid out like that. You still get the controls here, so you could hook those up as I showed you earlier, but I did want to show you that you could actually mix and match these components. So if you're thinking of moving over to Elements, but you kind of, you might have wanted to use Foundation at the same time, I'm not sure why, but it is definitely possible to do. But as you can see, this is kind of the default styling. Let's move that accordion into there just to space it out, and let's put our button in there as well. If we go to the browser, preview that, the default styling is just kind of slightly old, not to my liking at least. If you look at the default styling that we ship with Tailwind, everything's just a little bit more modern. It's nicer, it's cleaner, everything just looks a lot better out of the box. You don't have to do as much work to make your site look really modern and nice. Okay, to wrap this video up, what I want to say is that in Elements, every part of your site is built to be reusable components, and Tailwind just fits that model perfectly. We've built intuitive controls, as I've shown you, for things like spacing, text styles, transforms, layouts, effects. Everything that Tailwind gives you is available inside of Elements, and that is essentially giving you the power of CSS to flexibly design a site that works for you. It's powerful for designers, and it produces production quality code for developers. There's no overrides, there's no bloat, it's just clean semantic output. So to round up this video, you can use Tailwind Foundation or any custom CSS library inside of Elements, as I've shown you in this video. But if you're building a modern responsive website and you want full control without all of that complexity of an old baggage of those other CSS frameworks, Tailwind and Elements is just the obvious choice. It's fast, it's flexible, and in our opinion, it's the future of styling on the web.